Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who will somehow resist the urge to explain the importance of Joan of Arc on this video about the band Joan of Arc, no relation. The name of the album is Tim, Melina Theo Bobby, and I have spent 25 years basically ignoring this band. I've spent 25 years knowing about them, but this all goes back to my friend, and I've mentioned him a few times on this channel, my friend Ted. Now, my friend Ted was at one point the world's biggest fan of the Smashing Pumpkins, and then at a certain point, he changed musical tastes, well, slightly I suppose, towards what is now known as emo. And he got really into a whole series of bands. And, we used to go on all these trips together, and he would, make these mixtapes. And, we'd all share mixtapes with each other. And, we would listen to them, and, we would just always laugh, because we couldn't tell the difference between any of Ted's bands. They all just sounded like one band. And we kind of teased him about it, and looking back at it, I was being a jerk. Because a lot of those bands persisted. A lot of those bands are making music now. A lot of those bands don't sound anything like each other. A lot of those bands weren't even classified as emo at the time. I'm thinking of bands that I've covered on this channel, like Pedro the Lion, which released one of the best albums of last year, or American Football, an album that I liked quite a bit. The thing that I remember most is having these conversations with Ted, where he'd be very excited about these bands. And he'd tell me all about them, but I would just be totally tuned out. You know how you have a friend who gets really into something, and then they talk about it, and then you just kind of tune out? Well, that was the situation with this emo music that my friend Ted was talking about. So, what's interesting is I remember him telling me all about this mythical foundational group, Captain Jazz, and that this was the band. This is what started it all. And when we listened to these mixes of Ted's, they would basically all be alums of this Chicago-era proto-emo band. He loved Promise Ring, Joan of Arc, American Football. And the whole time, I would just kind of listen and just sort of say, not so great. At that point, I was already in my early to mid-20s, and I'd basically closed off my musical tastes and decided that this stuff was just too whiny. I don't need to hear about some suburban kid like me who doesn't want to wash his parents' car just like I don't want to, right? It just seemed to me to be whiny, suburban, privileged people with lots of guitars and forced dynamics, right? I was a jerk. I was wrong. Looking back, I've done a little bit of research for this episode, and I listened to some of their back catalog. I listened to some of the music that Ted played for me, and it's strong. It's really good. It's really good rock and roll. Now, the ironic thing is, now that I've come around, now that I've acknowledged that I was wrong to dismiss Joan of Arc all those years ago, and I did actually send a text to Ted to apologize, he doesn't remember me being really rude to him, so that's good. It's weird when you apologize for something and then someone goes, "Oh, you didn't used to make me... I didn't think that you thought I was an idiot." Oh, you didn't. But anyways, Ted's not an idiot, very smart guy. But anyways, it turns out I wasn't as mean as I meant to be, as I felt in my heart. I was totally closed off to this band and all those bands. I listen to them now, and they're really quite good. But there's a weird thing, where in my very brief amount of research, I think I read one review from a Chicago paper, this is apparently their goodbye album. This is it. They are closing up, and Joan of Arc is officially breaking up. But this reminds me of one of my favorite music jokes from the 80s, which was someone would go, "Oh, did you hear the news?" "What?" "Bob Dylan is getting back together." Right, the joke being that Bob Dylan himself is the whole band, and so he can't break up like Aerosmith breaks up or like the Eagles break up, and he can't get back together either. How can this band, Joan of Arc, break up when there's only been one consistent member all the way through? I don't even really understand it. The same thing kind of happened a couple months ago with microphones. It's good news, the microphones are back. But it was the same guy who was releasing music under a different name. I don't know. Is this all playing? Is this just kind of playing around? But it's weird when there are these bands like Panic at the Disco or Microphones or I guess even Tame Impala or Joan of Arc, where it seems that it's just one person with this rotating series of people. One thing I will say about this album is that it seems as though this one person, Tim Kinsella, it seems as though he's trying really hard to make this be a band. I mean, the name of the album is each of their names. The cover of the album is a little cute drawing of the four of them. And, based on a little bit of research, this is probably the most common lineup of the band. So it sort of makes sense, but it's still weird to have this swan song when they've had like 20 members over the past 25 years. And really, technically, Joan of Arc can't break up, right? As long as that guy exists, they can't really break up. But here I am, as they end, honing in on Joan of Arc. And it's funny, I feel sort of like, I've made this metaphor before, but in the movie Spinal Tap, there's a great scene where they're in these pods, and they get at the pods open and they start playing, and then at the end they go back into the pod. And the bass player, Derek Smalls, at the beginning of the song, the pod gets stuck. And so they're playing the music and he never gets out. I think it's Rock and Roll Creation. And he's sitting there, he's playing bass inside the pod, and at the very end the pod opens, and he goes out and is ready to rock, and then he sees everyone else is back in the pod, and he jumps in the pod, and the pod closes on him. That's kind of how I feel. Like, here I am with Joan of Arc. At the very end, I'm jumping back into the pod, but it's maybe an interesting take, because I imagine most of their fans have been with them through many ups and downs. Based on what I read and based on what I understand from talking to Ted, they are very experimental. They're a little bit more artsy, and this kind of comes through in this music. When I heard it, it didn't remind me of anything that I used to listen to back in the car when I was driving around with Ted and making fun of him. It doesn't even really sound like anything I would classify as emo. It doesn't really seem particularly whiny. It's mostly just interestingly put together. It's a very interestingly composed album. Lots of great production, instrumentation. At times, and I'll get into this later, it's maybe a little bit too interesting. Like, maybe this guy's just goofing around and not making art as much as he is doing little thought exercises in music. I don't know. I like the way the music goes in between sort of automated music and manufactured music or made music, electronic sounds, acoustic sounds. It's very well layered in together. There's like a really good drummer here, but at least half the time it seems there's a drum machine instead. And what's really interesting is that there are two singers. And I think this is the most interesting part, because when I remember listening to this band and bands like it, it was always the singers that drove me crazy, because I felt as though they were just whining, right? That's what emo is sort of about. If you're not initiated, it seems that it's about just whining. But one thing, maybe it's that he's older, or maybe it's just that I'm not such a jerk anymore, but his voice isn't really whiny. It's kind of shaky. And it made me think that there's actually a benefit to voices that are shaky that's different than whiny. Because, you know, whiny is complaining, but shaky can project a vulnerability, which can be very endearing and honest. And that's the sense that I get from this singer and the way that he sings. And then there's a female singer who apparently has only been in the band for 3 of their 79 albums or whatever, but her voice is very similar. She has a very similar vulnerability, and she has a real personality to her voice. Like a real, it stands out. It's not just like a bland vocalist in the back who they got to do some other things. She's not blandly talented or blandly boring. She sort of does the same thing that he does, but in her own way. And it's really impressive, and I think it's a testament to the band to exist for 2 decades and then have another singer come in and allow that person to have their own real personality that is theirs. I'd say the whole album itself is a pretty easy listen. It's not easy listening, you know, it's not soft jazz or whatever, which is actually hard to listen to. But, you know, it's not easy music. It's very complex and rich, but it goes well. You know, like I was able to listen to it while cooking dinner yesterday, and I was able to listen to it today during breakfast, and I'm able to listen to it on my headphones. It's a good album sort of for wherever you are, just based on the fact that it's fairly simple to listen to, but if you listen to the details, you hear the richness. The lyrics are probably my biggest problem with this album. It's just they're a little bit too vague. Like, it seems like maybe some of them are about the band ending. Maybe. The whole thing is weird, though. Again, this sort of incongruous sentimentality of a band closing, that a band breaking up that has only really been together for a couple of years. I'm not quite sure. I think the lyrics, the best way to understand them is the first lyric of the album, is in between the mind and the body. Those are the first words, opening words. The best of times is the worst of times. In between the mind and the body. Okay. But then what follows is like a bunch of like half-sung thoughts and ideas. Like that promise of between the mind and the body is not resolved in a way that was satisfying to me. maybe I'm being a dummy, and I mean this, right? Like, please correct me. If his message in this song is actually clear, and I'm just not seeing it because I'm Mr. Smarty Pants Professor and I think I know everything, please put in the comments what this song is about. But, you know, you go later on lyrics, oh, my dream, my destiny, now no one ever says your name to me. It's good. They're fine. These words are fine, but I don't quite get what they mean. And it seems as though, potentially, they're hiding behind ambiguity. They're using ambiguity to paper over a lack of depth. Or they're papering over ambiguity, and underneath is a giant hole of depth that goes to the Earth's core, and I just am not able to see it. So please let me know in the comments which way it is. That first song, I'll kind of go track by track now through the album, is really beautifully produced. A nice kind of silky bass line. The guitars intersect with the bass very nicely. I'm going to play you some of it. I want you to kind of hear the vocals, the kind of shaky vocals that sort of float over the music, and the way the bass and the guitar kind of intertwine together. It actually reminds me a little bit of the Chicago instrumental band Tortoise, just the way it sounds, the cleanness of the guitar. And I'm just going to play, at times, kind of like the vocals even sort of break down. There's these nice distortions that come in. They play a lot with distorted sounds and discordant sounds as well. So here's just a little taste. Here's like 10 seconds of the Joan of Arc album and their song Destiny Revision. Just an idea of what this album sounds like. You didn't hear much in there. I do suggest especially taking a listen to this song and hearing the way that everything is put together, and the way just that intimacy of that voice, that vulnerable, shaky voice, is quite nice. The next track is called Something Kind. Immediately follows with a song by the female vocalist. And this is cool because it starts with like a light drum machine, but then by the end, the drummer gets to kick in and really like do his best work on the album. Again, that kind of play between acoustic and electronic. Sort of intentionally annoying singing. I think she sings in a way where she knows it's going to be annoying, but it's on purpose, and it's really quite nice. These guitars come clashing in, a cool instrumental part, the like loud guitars coming through. You know, the thing I mentioned before, I kind of dismissed dynamics. Dynamics, when they're done like this, I really like, because this isn't just soft loud. It's just like different layers and textures being put together to create dynamics, which is really quite nice. Again, with the lyrics, I'm not quite sure what this is about. The idea of being drawn, it's the dawn of something kind, is an interesting lyric, right? It's the dawn of something good. But then these lyrics, I'm the one taking you from behind, you get the tits and periods, and you're the one who gets pregnant. A very like forceful line, a very kind of feminist line, but it's confusing because it's sung by a woman, and I don't know who wrote it. I don't know what they're getting at here. They're getting at something. The next track, Karma Repair Kit, returns to the male vocalist. And this is just a lot of messing around with different instruments, putting them together. This cool ascending guitar. And lyrically, it seems to be about not being good enough. I suppose that the first track and the third track are united in this sense. I've got a lot to do to possibly come out even, is what he says. A lot of this album, I guess, is about remorse and just feeling like you're not very... like you were not very good. Which, if I wrote scripts for these damn things instead of just notes, I would have thought to structure me feeling bad about being mean to Ted in this same context. I'm sort of doing what the album is doing. I'm looking back and like, I've got a lot of work to do to make up for how pretentious and annoying I was when I was 20 years old. But I don't have scripts, I have notes. So just imagine that I did that and go, wow, Skye, that's a good point. I can't believe you ate the gizzard. The next track is called Creature and Being. This is the low point. This is a bad song. I just don't like it. I felt lost. The whole time the song starts, I couldn't pick out the lyrics from anywhere. I didn't know where I was going. Just sort of, we create. If I have one problem with the band, it's this sense of formlessness that we feel at times, the way everything's layered. It seems as though everything's sort of recorded in layers, which can have a negative effect on a sense of structure in a song, which I get the sense here. This is just not good. It's the only song I don't like on the album, but I definitely don't like it. Next track, Land Surveyor, is an instrumental. And this is the question that I have. Like, there are times in this album where I said it's maybe a little bit too creative, a little bit too interesting. At times it feels like divertimento, whatever. divertimento, right? Like kind of like little fun musical ideas, right? Like Mozart used to make those, right? Like little tiny musical ideas. They aren't symphonies, they aren't concertos. Just here's a little fun idea and let's put it out there. A couple tracks on this album feel that way, and especially the instrumental tracks, where it just feels like it's a good artist who has some neat ideas and puts these songs on there, and it sounds good, but it's not quite something to sink your teeth into. Maybe it's a continuation of that sense that I get of sort of a lack of form, right? A lack of being able to hold on to something. Fortunately, the next track jumps right back in with a female singer, feedback 3/4, kind of a cool dance hall drum beat, drum machine kind of thing, a real kind of driving song. Like this would be a great track if Ted and I were ever to go on another road trip again and have a car with a cassette player. Those are a lot of ifs there. You know, like I could imagine listening to this song while driving, having it kind of drive you along and just be a nice song and be sort of contemplative, kind of nasally singing again. And then what's cool is that these lyrics here, it's a natural conclusion that people can buy. So it seems as though they're singing about movies, but maybe they're singing about themselves. Maybe they're talking about the band. You know, just this sense of fiction having to be believable, and maybe things that are believable are actually not that interesting in real life. I don't know. At some point, that really super aggressive synthesizers come in and pianos at the same time. Like a lot of interesting things happening here, and it ends. And it leads into the ending of the album. And like the last 4 tracks of this album are all spectacular. I mean, this is a pretty short album, 30 minutes. But the last 4 tracks are really special, really the way they come in. It starts off with another instrumental, divertimento, the dawn of something. I don't even know if that's the right term. Please correct me. I have this weird thing where because I'm a professor and I speak with authority, that people often think that I think I'm correct all the time. I really don't. I like to be corrected. So please correct me. But just kind of a instrumental song, but I would say it's better than the other. It's got more interesting, like these blasts from the keyboards, and it feels like you're being sort of set up for this next part of the album. Which leads into the track Cover Letter Song, which is like a slacker anthem, you know, like going back to the 90s. It's almost like this weird 9 Inch Nails-ish feeling at times, kind of a drone, wah, wah, wah. And then he starts talking about all the jobs that he's had. You know, I worked at a supermarket, I put away shopping carts, I worked at a record store. He just goes on and just like menial job after menial job after menial job, moving boxes. Just the drone of the song seems to represent the drone of his life. I collected tickets at a parking lot. But what's interesting is that the out of this song is he talks about he was dreaming and he was making songs on his own and he was dreaming of becoming the next Tim Kinsella. So becoming the next himself. That's an interesting idea, right? It really supports the theme of this album is about the band breaking up and thinking about his past. And actually this fits really well with that Microphones album. Because, you know, Microphones album is a lot about his arrival to music and how did he like break out of his sort of boring life and what were the influences that led to him doing something more interesting. This kind of feels that way. This great droning music of just all these things that he's done and just this hope that he could become something, the next himself, which is a really interesting idea. Rising Horizon is a silly thing to say. Rising Horizon? Rising Horizon. Rural juror. Rising Horizon is a weird, I can't stop saying that. I will though. It's a sweet, weird waltz. There's a lot of like sounds on this. This album gets tagged a lot with experimental. And from when I looked around, it seems as though this band gets tagged with experimental. That's kind of lazy. I mean, I guess I see it. I guess I see that it's experimental, but it takes a lot more to be experimental than just like having random sounds thrown in or random discordant elements thrown into your music. I'd say what makes them more experimental is not that, it's more their the way they're sort of constructing songs and having these instruments sort of interact with each other. There's like the sounds of like a woman groaning in the background and like bells and like maybe people like skating on ice. I can't quite tell what it is. It never really obscures the music though. You can always make it out clearly. Her singing actually sort of reminds me of They Might Be Giants, but maybe it's just that kind of like, is this intentionally annoying or not? But what's nice is it resolves really sweetly. And that's why I think the end of the album is so strong, even compared to the beginning of the album, which I think is good, is this like, is having this discordant, like sounds in the back and this nasally voice, and the chorus is just really lush, and it's just really beautiful, and it's just a really nice moment. And there's even a post-chorus moment, which actually sort of reminds me of like a Funhouse Mirror Bruce Springsteen, sort of like, those quiet moments of Bruce Springsteen, like the hoo 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 kind of moments. It sounds a little bit like that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just stuck in weird music references. That has a nice interjection between someone talking about showing off their artwork to adults when they're children. And maybe, again, that's all tied into this theme of what it is to make music and what it means. Then the album ends with Upside Down, Bottomless Pit. Now, that was intentional. Earlier when I talked about the pit, like how deep are the lyrics? Is the obscurity a facade that's covering up a shallow pit or a deep pit? That was on purpose. Because I'm thinking about this nice image of an upside down bottomless pit, right? Just think about that. That's even more interesting than Horizon. Like, think about an upside down, brought to you by Verizon. Think about an upside down bottomless pit. So like, right? It's an interesting image. And it's kind of a transcendent image. And the whole song is about sort of even the formlessness of life. There's no bleachers, there's no sidelines, there's no out of bounds. The guitar is really nice, kind of junky, sort of pavement-like. The lyrics even come in before you're really ready. Like, I don't think they come in on the 4, I think they come in on like the 3. And he's just really jumping into this nice lyrics and this nice ending. A sort of, much like the rest of the album, a somewhat understandable, somewhat comprehensible, spiritual call to art, I think. I don't know. But if you're a fan of Joan of Arc, let me know. Amazingly, I've been texting with Ted, and he says he likes the album and he bought it. So this is great, because the last couple Ted bands that I reviewed, he's like, yeah, I don't like their new stuff. And I was like, God damn it, I like their new stuff. So I like it, and he likes it, so that's a pretty good sign. So for Ted, Brad, Mark, and the rest of the people in the car with me going to Canada, there's the camera.